Time to check in with Amanda Lang. She's our CTV News Chief Financial Correspondent. Amanda, again, another busy week as far as business news is concerned. Let's start off with what came out today. Canada's GDP rebounding in July after 3 months of contraction. So your take on that, is this something to be optimistic about or thankful it didn't just keep going down?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of knew there had been an expectation that we would see modest growth in the back half of the year. The Bank of Canada had said as much. They're looking at 1% growth in the second half. So although we did see that contraction and we were a little bit worried about it, there was this expectation it would improve. What I would say is for people who are saying, well, it doesn't feel very good, there are whole chunks of the economy that aren't doing well. And so there is there are kind of mini recessions happening, if you will, across manufacturing. There have been big job losses. Industries that are being hit by tariffs are certainly feeling it. And so overall, you might say, okay, it doesn't feel great. But at the very least, what we can say is the economy is weathering the bigger picture storm, at least better than our worst fears. So hopefully we get through a few months of pain and into a better, clearer picture.
Yeah, kind of brings up that whole resilience word all over again. I know I use it all the time, but that is kind of, to a degree, that's what this showed, does it not?
100%. And, one interesting thing about the GDP we did get is that a big contribution was from mining, quarrying, oil and gas extraction, and we're going to see some big spending on that.
Right.
And there's jobs associated with that as well. But GDP isn't always the best measure of how people are doing. And so we want to look at things like our own kind of final domestic demand, which has been holding up. Remember, a lot of our economy is domestic. And so, you buy Canadian, and if your job is still secure, we should feel better than the headline actually offers up.
By the way, so I saw a story about Tiff Macklem, the governor of the Bank of Canada, having spoken this week, earlier in the week, with what looks like, I don't know that the story got much attention, typically not the kind of guy who you'd expect to come out and have strong words about the economy. He said Canada must make urgent structural reforms to ensure its long-term economic prosperity. He also said during that same meeting, our growth trajectory has been permanently lowered as a result of the U.S. trade tariffs. And then he added, we should have done something. I've been making these changes 15 years ago, but we didn't. So let's start making them now. That seems pretty dire, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was really, I actually had Tiff Macklem on my podcast last week on the Wonk podcast, and my takeaway from that conversation was exactly that, where he's basically saying, look, as a central bank, we can only control what we control, and that is price stability. But the other kind of lever or piston that is at play here is economic growth, and that's not really something the bank is supposed to do. That's for government to actually policy to set. And so, yeah, the wake-up call is not a new one, but boy, we need it more than ever, which is we actually need more growth than we did before because we have this permanent setback. It's hard to get your head around, but when you get a big gouge in the economy, the way the tariffs can do or a bad recession can do, it sort of resets you at a lower base. So even if you grow after that, you're growing from a lower base. And so it creates kind of when they say a permanent setback, it's more economist thinking than real world thinking, but it does have long-term consequences in our capacity for growth.
By the way, with respect to tariffs, and I don't know how much of this applies to Canada, we found out last night new tariffs now being launched by the U.S. on branded and patented pharmaceuticals, kitchen cabinets, bathroom vanities, heavy trucks. It seems to be going from bad to worse. Again, I don't know how much of this directly affects Canada, but it doesn't look like it's even close to being over.
It's not, and it's the uncertainty, right, and what it does to businesses. I mean, the problem that we're having, and this is why it isn't showing up necessarily in the data now, but it will. We may not see tariffs on our drugs, but you can guarantee that a drug company that has higher costs into the U.S. market is going to raise prices elsewhere,
right,
or find a way to take it out of, find profit somewhere else. Same with cabinet makers, right? They may not have a tariff coming into Canada, but they need to charge us a little more to make up for the balance. Who knows how that's going to play out? All we can do is focus on what we're doing, which is trying to grow our markets, find new markets, stay confident, invest in this country. But this uncertainty is just exactly why people are so rattled that every day there's something else. I mean, the thing about the drugs, he wants manufacturing in America. So drug makers that are already moving some manufacturing there may be spared this. But the consequence of it for sick Americans today is real, right? If you're a less wealthy American who needs a drug today, you may pay more, and that seems really unfair.
And even for those companies that will open there, it's not as if you flip a switch and we have a company and it's based in America now, right? These things have to play out over months and years.
No, but it does sound as though some of the drug makers have come out and said, we've promised to build and we've promised to spend $100 billion, so that we don't think we're going to get hit with it. So they might just have to promise, and who knows if they even mean it.
Yeah, and we know some of those promises made in the last administration are still waiting to be fulfilled. But that aside, I want to get to the other big story this week from yesterday. All of a sudden, out comes the minister responsible, Joelle Lightbound, and says, okay, we're going to radically change the way Canada Post operates. I think for people who don't follow, this story between Canada Post and the unions, which has been ongoing now for a while, when you heard the numbers cited by the minister of how much money Canada Post loses, I think it opened quite a few eyes. But where does this leave us from a business perspective? We're now back to a strike yet again in this country.
It's such a hard story because these are good jobs, and there are some people and some businesses that do really rely on this service. But in the main, it's a system that probably is outdated, right? That probably has outlived its function, and so the government's been trying to make changes, and the union has been resisting it. I don't think this ends well. I don't think a strike is going to end well. They're better off, I think, trying to come to some negotiated view of what a healthier Canada Post looks like. Things like ending straight to the door delivery and going to community mailboxes. And that's been something we've been seeing for years. We probably just have to get there because the model of, one human walking your letter up to your front door, it does feel a little outdated in this day and age. And one thing is for sure is it's very expensive.
Last thing I want to touch on is the story from yesterday as well. Canada's job vacancy rate fell in July to its lowest level in 8 years. So what does this portend for jobs and for people looking for jobs?
Well, so this is interesting, right? It makes the job market a little bit tighter for people. We have seen, obviously, there are different pockets where there's a lot of weakness. So youth employment is one place that we've watched pretty closely. But it just means there are, fewer jobs out there. It means if you were thinking about changing your job or you thought that you had a little bit of power in your ability to get a raise, now might be the time, right? It's a little bit of a tighter market, but it's hard to know. I have to look closer at the data to see how long-lasting this is as well. Last
thing I want to ask, we had the federal watchdog yesterday, the fiscal watchdog, come out and say the federal government's budget, or the deficit rather, will top, he said, $68.5 billion. I know this is all a lot of guesswork right now. We're not going to know, obviously, till November. He seemed to imply that this was absolutely devastating. So what's your take on that?
It was really interesting, strong language, and especially because we don't have the data yet, as you say. We don't know whether the government will find ways to make that deficit smaller or whether the deficit will be even bigger. The point that he made that was super interesting is we've been trained to look at this debt to GDP, the fiscal anchor, and this is the first time he thinks they're abandoning it, and that would be the first time we've done that in decades. So that was a bit of a warning that, he wants a little bit of prudence in the view of where that goes, and maybe he's doing it in time for the government to do it, right? To figure out how to budget for it and give us some guidance beyond this budget. We know this is going to be a big spending budget, right? Because it's the one that's trying to save us from the tariffs. But we do have to kind of have a longer view of how we get to some semblance of balance.
I want to ask you one last thing, not related to any of this, but yesterday I asked our audience with respect to the Canada Post strike, because the announcement was made close to when I went on air. And someone called up, and I did not know this, and I wonder if you did. Do you know that you can you can download a Canada Post app, and it will let you know when you have mail delivery, whatever it happens to be, whether you got something in the mail or not. Were you aware of that?
I was not aware of that.
There you go.
I love that. That's great.
And
they
it
actually
works.
are more, they're even more digital than I thought.
Problem there is how many people you didn't know, I didn't know. It took one of my listeners to call up and say, by the way, this has been out there for a while, and most people had no idea, and maybe that's part of the problem here.
Yeah. I mean, there may well be a whole reimagined business model that will make total sense. They just have to find a way to get there.
Yeah, better hurry. Amanda Lang, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Unmistakably Canadian.
It's the music that raised you.
The artists raising the bar.
Hi, this is Brian Adams.
Hey, my name's Brett Emmons. I'm from the Glorious Sons.
Hi, I'm Nelly Furtado.
Made in Canada. The station that champions Canadian music.
Loud, proud, and all yours.
No passports required. Just press play.
Tap into Made in Canada now on iHeartRadio.ca
Or the free iHeartRadio app.